It's time to Ask a Rabbi. Call in with your questions and comments at 340-1590. And now, here's your host, Rabbi Shafir Lobb.
And Rabbi Lobb, are you with us on the phone?
I am with you on the phone.
And here in the studio is Shmuel Mordechai.
Hi, Shmuel Mordechai.
That's also, for the folks that are listening, known as Stuart Mitchell, Stuart Address, the lawyer. I play a rabbi on TV. No, I don't. I'm actually in the studio because the rabbi is in traffic. And I'm glad she's on the phone with us, because otherwise I was going to have to tell you stories about my Judaism.
Ah, that would be an interesting story.
It probably would have been. I was panicking and figured, what am I going to talk about on Ask a Rabbi?
You know, you never know the questions that would cross the rabbi's eyes.
That's right. I probably could have filled an hour talking about Judaism. Why don't you look? I know you're busy for tonight's program. Why don't you go on home?
Ah, there you go. Now I think, you know what? I'm just about to turn off of Orange.
Ah.
So I will be there very, very shortly.
All right. So what would you like to start talking about?
Well, I'm going to be talking today about Pesach, about Passover.
Not
Because
Purim?
that's coming up. Yeah, it's only a month away. I mean, tonight we still have dress-up Shabbat, what we call Lucie Shabbat. And I will tell you this much. Even if you've been to one of Eitz Chayim's Lucie Shabbats, this one is going to be extra special. You never know. You don't know what the rabbi's coming as.
And let me tell you something, folks. When she says you don't know what the rabbi's coming as, she's not joking around. This rabbi has had some interesting costumes in the past. They do get fairly extravagant.
They can go anywhere.
Yeah, and they do have some relationship to Purim. I mean, you know, maybe she's Queen Esther, maybe she's Queen Vashti, maybe she's King Achashverosh. I don't know.
Yeah, well, there was one year that I came as a swaro cactus, King Achashverosh.
Well, remember, I was talking about if I could find some hay, I was going to get some hay, and I was going to come as Haman tonight.
Yes, well, I do believe that there are a few places that have hay in town.
Yeah, just down on Orange Avenue, I think that there's a feed supply.
Yeah, somebody
store.
told me to go to a horse shop. I looked at them last night and I said, I don't know where to go for horse stuff.
You know what? Even Tractor Supply up here on Okeechobee Road in Fort Pierce, they may have some hay. I bet they do.
Nelson's has some
or
hay.
straw. They at least have straw for bunnies.
Yeah.
Straw for
there
bunnies.
You go.
All right, I may have to
You
find something.
never know. I mean, it's available. The part is that Purim is such a crazy, wacko, wild holiday that anything goes. The wildest books in Scripture, and I confess that I get confused by people who look at it as if it were a serious holiday.
You know, in our little village of Anatevka, opposite Met Stadium, on holidays like this, Purim, Passover, we like to throw things at each other. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're going to have noisemakers, and we are going to read the Megillah tonight.
Megillah Gorilla?
Megillah Gorilla. He might be there, too. You never know.
Maybe I could come as a gorilla, Megillah Gorilla.
There you go.
Because I've been told before that I'm a gorilla.
I'm not touching that one. Not on the radio, not in person.
Questions that would cross our rabbi's eye. It'll die.
Never, ever know.
Oh, I hear her in the hallway. Uh-oh. Here she is live and in person. Rabbi Shafir Lobb.
Oh, let her sit down.
I will swap places with you there. And we are in good shape.
I'm being evicted from the pilot seat and being sent to the co-pilot seat.
There you go. I love technology. Oh, do not drag the mic. So.
Oh, give you the headphones?
All right.
So I am now.
Oh, you know.
In the event of a crash landing, I don't have any headphones. I cannot speak to the tower.
We'll fix all of that here shortly. So let me get the eyes on so I
you can see what you're saying?
I can pretend to see what I'm saying, yes. There we go. The joys of technology. You know, there was a day this would not have been possible, but here we go. And
I'm glad this wasn't Ask a Mortician.
Ask a Mortician.
I don't know what I would have done.
You know, that's a show we never had. Maybe we have an opening for Ask a Mortician.
Ask a Mortician. There you go. Okay. All right, everyone. Thank you for your patience with Ask a Rabbi on this beautiful, it's appropriate that it would be Purim that I would get stuck in the construction, that they would decide to move a couple of trucks. The joys, the joys of it all. So, all right. And people are saying, are you on the radio? Yes, I am on the radio. So you can give me a call, just like I just did, 772-340-1590. It's one way to get on. And so here we go. And if you could text Sharon and tell her that we're live. Okay, she found me. There we go. All right, everybody, thank you for joining me live. Thank you for joining me on the radio. Thank you for listening in. And we are going to be talking about maybe a little bit about Purim and then wrapping up with a little bit about Passover. Well, see how we can do this? It's going to look really cute on YouTube. The joys of live radio. Always more exciting. All right, so back to Purim. It's a crazy, crazy day. It is, we have somebody on, Bill on PSL. Okay. Bill on line 2. Thank you for calling in. What's your question, sir?
Yes, I had a question, Rabbi. Could you explain what a Seder is and what's its function? I don't understand what a Seder is.
Okay.
I see it in the paper, but I don't know what it is. Could you explain it and what's its purpose?
I would be thrilled to explain what is a Seder.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
I'm going to listen off the air.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, so Bill called in and he asked, what is a Seder? He sees them being advertised in the newspaper, and our congregation's also open to people making a reservation. You'll see our ad as well in the paper and on Facebook, etc., all the different places you can make a reservation for a Seder. The Seder is the ritual meal that in America, and actually we're backfeeding into Israel, it used to be that it was the first night of Passover, or Erev, actually the evening leading into Passover. Jewish holidays always start at sunset the night before, because the scripture says it was evening, it was morning, day 1, evening, morning, day 2, etc. And so Jewish days start at sunset. We become the next day. So, and that's why Shabbat starts on Friday night. So the Seder is the ritual meal. The word Seder itself means arrangement or order. And it's a highly ritualistic meal celebrating the festival of Passover first, and now it's customary to do it second night. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Families are bigger, family, friends, etc. Different people want to do. And I know some people do 3 and 4. But a Seder is a ritual meal. And the object of the Seder is actually to get people to ask questions.
Yeah,
I was waiting for that.
Right.
Which is out of Talmud. There's a section that says, why is this night different from all other nights? We repeat those questions during the Seder. The Seder is, in some ways, a later version of the holiday. In 2,000 years ago, when the temple stood, there was not a Seder. It was not the meal. That's so cute. I like that. So he's showing me that I'm blocking my face. There you go. Okay. And hopefully now I got it further down. I love thank you, Cliff. I love everybody who wants to have me looking good on the live show as well, and on the live feed for YouTube. So back to the Seder. 2,000 years ago, when the temple stood, and people would do the lambing festival, which is part of Passover, Pesach, the Pesach, the spare or extra boy lambs, and we've talked about it, but we'll talk about it again. Then you would have a meal of the lamb, bitter herbs to remember the time that we were slaves in Egypt, and the matzah for the new harvest, the winter wheat, the wheat festival. And so Pesach is a combination of the lambing, the wheat, and the Freedom Festival all wrapped into one. And you would have had this festival meal with the lamb. Unfortunately, around the years 70, the temple was destroyed. And at that point, we no longer sacrificed the lamb in the temple. So there was no longer the lambing festival. Yeah, you still get sacrificed lambs.
You still had extra.
You still have extra. Mm-hmm. We still eat lamb. I had lamb this week. It was not alive, so and it's not still living now. It's been fully digested. Thank you. I am the predator. It was sacrificed, and you could say that I was the agent because I paid for the lamb. The only thing is now when we sacrifice an animal, we wrap it in plastic and put it in Publix or in Winn-Dixie or Bravo. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the only difference. We wrap it in plastic. In those days, I guess they wrapped it in whatever they wrapped it in and sent it home with you. And so that drastically changed when the temple was destroyed because we could no longer do the lambing festival the same way. And you could not bring the lamb and sanctify its life and take it ritualistically. And so it had to change. And the Jews living in 70 to 150, somewhere in that range, looked around at the other cultures. And they took some things from the Romans. They took a Roman symposium, kind of gathering of intellectual thought process and questioning. And they also took Nowruz, which is the Zoroastrian spring festival. And in fact, if you look at a Nowruz plate and you look at a Seder plate, you're going to go, okay, that's where that came from. Because what Nowruz does is it gathers all the spring vegetables into a plate, and they have a festive meal as well. And so since Passover is in spring, these two elements were combined with the Passover story, and the story is now ritualized into something called Haggadah, which means the telling. So it's a booklet or a book. Some of them can get quite thick, that tells some of the history, some of the story, some of the questions, and it's generally a night of talking about what does it mean to be free. What does it mean to be free? Because free is not anarchy. It doesn't mean that you get to do everything you want. That's not what freedom is. Freedom is the ability to control more of what you do, but you're still a little bit limited by your situation. You're limited by your finances. You're limited by your family, friends, and whoever is within your proximity, because freedom can't go through another person. It has to stop. At some point, my fourth grade teacher said 1 inch from anybody else's nose. And I always thought that was a really pretty good working definition of how far your freedom can extend. So I can't encroach on somebody else, or I am damaging them, if you will, and taking away some of their freedom. So I don't have that right. Now, if they're out to harm me, then yes, I have a right to interfere with that action. But that's self-preservation. And that's a little bit different. So anyway, Bill, I hope I answered your question. It's a ritual meal. They're usually fairly expensive to produce. Reservations for our Seder are $36 for adults and $20 for teenagers and preteens, rather, and free for little ones. We have also got a family cap of $100 for anyone coming. So if it's you and your kids, you're not going to go broke. But it's a ritualistic meal, and a lot is explained. It takes about an hour between when you start the Seder, for us. For some people, it takes longer. For some, it takes
5
less.
hours, 6 hours.
Some families, it takes a long time. But we're eating the meal in an hour. So the dinner's usually right around 7. And we've done that enough times now that I think we're pretty sure about how that works. So we've got it down. And this year we're going to be at a great venue. It's going to be a little bit roomier than it's been when we've had it at the temple. We kind of maxed out last year, so we've moved it. It'll be over on Gaber Street. So Gaber Court. Sorry about that. And it'll be nice. It should be fun.
Now, Rabbi, would you agree that was sort of a rabbinical dissertation as to the Seder?
Yeah, it was.
All right.
It was
You
long.
mind if I put into English?
Sure.
Hey, Bill, if you're still listening, we're all going to sit around a table. We're going to sing some songs
Throw
that
some
celebrate the Jews' exodus from Egypt, where they were slaves, getting through the Reed Sea, known as the Red Sea, why that really happened, what we faced in the desert, and the matzah being the unleavened bread because there was no time to let it rise. And we're going to, do some prayers, tell some stories, do some singing, have 4 ritual glasses of wine.
Or grape juice.
Well, most people do grape juice. I do grape juice. I'll tell you something. Manischewitz grape juice or Kedem grape juice, it's pretty good tasting grape juice. And if you're going to have 4 glasses of it, hey, it's, you can feel drunk off of that. And, a lot of it is, as the rabbi says, questioning. We've got this thing called the 4 questions. Manish Tana Halilah is that. We call Halilot. Why is this night different from all other nights? And we answer the questions. And, we answer the questions from the perspective of 4 different types of kids. The kid who's too young to know better, a little older kid. And the concept of, at different ages, we're capable of understanding different levels of what any event, including a holiday, means. And so, yes, we're doing the prayers, we're doing the songs, we're having little appetizers in between. We finally get to the ritual meal. We have the meal. There's a little more stuff afterwards. And then there's this great thing called finding the afikomen. If you have any kids around, you definitely want to be part of that. The afikomen is hidden early in the meal, usually by the senior adult who's hosting the Seder. And it's breaking the middle matzah in half, wrapping it up, and hiding it somewhere, let's say in the house. And at the appropriate time after the meal is done and when you're getting ready for dessert, all the kids go searching for the afikomen to get a prize for finding it. Now, that prize can be little trinkets. As the kids get older, you know what they want. They want money. Hard, cold, cash on the barrelhead. Now, the interesting thing is, my understanding is that the kids have the power, because you're not allowed to conclude the Seder without having that other piece of the matzah, the afikomen. And so unless the kids agree to your payment plan, you don't get it back and you can't conclude the Seder. So they have a little bit of leverage. Now, usually they don't know that. Sometimes they need a lawyer, ask a lawyer, and they get a little bit more than they might have otherwise expected. But it's a fun event where they go searching everywhere. Sometimes you have to tell them, no, you can't go into the bedrooms, things like that. They usually find it. Sometimes you got to tell them you're getting hotter, you're getting warmer. It's a little bit of a game. It's fun. So the whole idea really boils down to, yes, it's a ritual meal, but it's a ritual meal that tells an important story to remember, tells a story about slavery, a story about a transformation into freedom, and it is designed to be educational, it's designed to be religious in nature, and it is designed to be fun. And so anybody who hasn't experienced a Seder, ours aren't extraordinarily long.
No, and they are fun.
You can tolerate them. They are fun. We throw things at each other.
I was waiting for
Now,
that.
why do we throw things at each other? It's not because we don't like each other. We are recognizing the 10 plagues, which is what Moses used to persuade Pharaoh to let the Jews go. One of those plagues, for example, is frogs. Well, the rabbi has a supply of small little plastic frogs that get passed out. And when we start talking about the frogs raining in Egypt,
frogs.
It is raining. Those frogs are being tossed by everybody in the air at each other. Doesn't really hurt. It's a lot of fun. Sometimes I take aim at particular people. They take aim at me. There are other things that we'll throw too. Maybe some rice, a little bit like Rocky Horror. But it's fun. So if you haven't experienced it,
okay,
come experience it. You'll learn a little bit. You'll enjoy a lot, and that's the layman's dissertation of a Seder.
So Sharon just shared on Facebook she used to go to the seders that we held, Sederim, the seders in Tucson, and her comment is she still has frogs in her purse and on her desk and all around. There are many. Some people actually collect the different frogs because over the years I have acquired quite a variety of frogs, and I'm always looking for more plastic frogs. They're assorted little plastic frogs, and we also have some very realistic other creatures that come out. So you never know what you could find. It's a fun meal.
I'm 58 and I like throwing things.
I know you like throwing things, and it's a fun meal. It's a celebration. It's a celebration of freedom. It's not only the plagues. The plagues are one of the places where we do it. We also do it at Dayenu. We hit people with scallions.
Dayenu.
Yeah, that's an Afghani tradition. So, and that's one of the things that I like to do with the Seder is I'll bring in different Seder traditions, because as Jews have left Israel and have gone to all different parts of the world, pieces have changed over time, interaction with the local culture, etc. And so there are Afghani customs, there are Sephardi customs, there are Ashkenaz. There's many different kinds of Jews, many different nationalities among Jews, and we bring some of all of that. It's a little bit of learning, quite a bit of fun, and a way too much good food. It's kind of like Thanksgiving, and then some. Getting up from the table is never easy at the Seder.
Especially after 4 glasses of wine.
Yeah, if you have the 4 glasses of wine, that definitely is an inducement to having to sit for a while. And some people get dressed up and act like they've literally just come out of Egypt and want to tell you the story. The requirement for the holiday is to tell your story of your exodus from Egypt. And so most of the year we're invited to remember that the Exodus happened. When we get to Passover, to Pesach, we're not just supposed to remember it, we're supposed to relive our own Exodus out of Egypt. And, that's to me one of the things that I love about Judaism, which is the invitation to actually experience the sacred story. It's not just telling the sacred story, but it's a way of actually going into and being part of the sacred story. And so it's not their exodus out of Egypt, it's our exodus out of Egypt. And that really changes the way that the holiday works for you and your understanding. Now I'm going to take a little bit of a sidebar. We're about halfway through the show, and aside from the fact that in a few moments we'll play one of a little bit about the congregation. We'll let you hear just a little bit about it. In fact, maybe let's go ahead and do that. And on the other side of it, I'm going to point out some other things that we have and have not said. Congregation Eitz Chayim, your welcoming, inclusive, spiritual, and joyful Jewish home in Port St. Lucie. We welcome you to renew your inner Jew and join us. We are Reform Jewish with a renewal flair. We are multi-generational. We are welcoming to all. Come join us for a Friday night at 7:30 p.m. for our Kabbalat Shabbat services, or Stolen Moments on Saturday morning, where we discuss the Parsha of the week at 9:30 a.m. Shabbat morning services follow Stolen Moments, usually at around 10:30 a.m. Our address is 540 Northwest University, across from Met Stadium, and we are in Suite 102. Again, that's 540 Northwest University, Suite 102. Please join us for Friday nights at 7:30 p.m. or Shabbat morning starting at 9:30 a.m. for Stolen Moments. Congregation Eitz Chayim.
And Ask a Rabbi continues here on WPSL. Back to your host, Rabbi Shafir Lobb.
Thank you for staying with me and being part of this week's Ask a Rabbi. So we were talking about the Seder. Bill had asked, what is a Seder? Why are we seeing them advertised? And that's because they are traditionally open to the larger community. People are welcome to join it. And it's a large, close crowd. for lack of a better way of putting it. You really feel like your family, particularly I think the way that we do it. We really stress that idea of that we're all in one group, and that we're going on this journey together. And the thing that I'll point out, you might have noticed, or maybe you didn't notice, there was no mention of anything vaguely approaching blood on anywhere or in anything. There's a very, 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 well, actually, the blood itself is not mentioned. The only thing that is mentioned is the death of the firstborn. And it's just listed as one of the plagues. And it's just, it's tossed out there along with the frogs and the hail and all the other plagues. It's just one of 10 plagues. And that is a very small part of the Seder. It's mostly mentioned as a reminder that our celebration of freedom must be tempered by the suffering of our enemies, which is, and we diminish, we take away some of the wine or grape juice, the beverage of celebrating. 10 drops, basically, to represent each of the plagues. And that's where it's mentioned and how it's mentioned. And the idea is that, yes, we're allowed to celebrate because it's freedom for us, but God's creatures suffered in that event. And so the celebration is not pure. It is to be diminished because even our enemies are God's creatures. They're God's children. And that's not to be made light of, not in the slightest. I think that's one of the things that people sometimes forget today, is that all humans, your enemies included, are God's children. And they're all entitled to the basic freedoms of life, the right to pursue happiness, or however we're going to define those. Everybody's entitled to those basic legal remedies, no matter what their situation. They're not to be abused or encroached on. And, especially the soldiers, right? The Egyptian soldiers were following the orders of the Pharaoh. They were not free either. And they didn't, So, yeah, it's there's a sobering side to it. So that's, I think, very important. And there was a shift with Passover, with Pesach, when it went into the Christian sacred story. And it changed quite a bit, I think, from the way that Jews understand it. If you go and Google Passover songs and you hear the Jewish Passover songs, you're going to hear songs of freedom, songs of returning to Israel, returning to the homeland, that kind of thing. Those are there's a little bit about, escaping Egypt, and it's part of the story. But the big focus is freedom. And part of that also is because we're no longer an agrarian society. We're now mostly city dwellers, as most of the world is. And so there's not the lambing festival or the new wheat that's brought in. Although at the end, the year that I lived in Jerusalem, we went to a restaurant and waited. You go at sunset the last day, and you wait and wait and wait, and they bake bread, the first batch, and so you've got to wait however long it takes for the instant rising of the flour till they can form it into loaves and get it out to you, and that was great fun, and it was very tasty because it was extremely fresh. To just come out of the oven, was rushed throughout the city. The little bakery trucks scatter, and they make good money that night. And it's the first taste of bread, and those other good things. So, yeah, kind of fun. No longer the flat bread that tastes kind of like the box.
Unless you do interesting things to it, like matzah brai.
There's lots of meals, and there's, I will tell you that you can buy just about anything in a Passover version today. You can certainly buy cakes. The stores are starting to stock up. I actually bought my first brick of matzah, and it's stashed away from everything else because the rest of my house is not yet ready for it. But I wanted my block of I love Yehuda matzah, the Israeli matzah. I fell in love with it when I was in Israel, and it tastes different. So I always make sure I get a box of it. It sells out pretty quickly, so I'm not the only one who knows to look for it. But they don't have the specialty stuff out yet, so the stuff is just starting to come into the stores. It's about a month away. But you can find noodles. I have found, breakfast cereals, Cocoa Puff kind of things that are made with Passover flour substitute. Potato starch is a big substitute that's used. There's brownies, there's cakes, there's tons of kichel and cookies and candies galore. There's no lack of calories. One of Bill's favorite candies comes out at Passover, which is they're in the shape of like lemons and limes, and it's basically all sugar dipped in sugar. Yeah.
Yummy.
And different colors. So that's he cannot resist a container of those. They'll open and they'll be gone within minutes. So I have been told to only get a few of those because he goes through them too fast. And but I'll tell you one thing that mattered to me, that makes a big deal for Passover, for Pesach, and this might surprise people, which is that one of the things that's been difficult has been finding coffee and chocolate and tea that is fair trade certified and kosher for Pesach. That's two certifications, neither of which a few years ago was easy. The year before I moved to Port St. Lucie, the last year in Tucson, we didn't have any chocolate. I made pictures of chocolate bars for people because there was no fair trade kosher for Passover chocolate. And so it was no chocolate, which for some people is just, how can you do that? I remember growing up, Barton's chocolates up in New York. Yeah, you remember them too. They always came out with incredible Passover chocolates. That, weight was never a small thing at Passover, at Pesach. And the first year I was here in Port St. Lucie, Equal Exchange came out with a kosher for Passover fair trade certified chocolate. And so we had chocolate. I bought a bunch of it and gave it out to everybody at the Seder. And we've had it ever since. We've had that chocolate. And we use that, put one of the pieces of chocolate on the Seder plate and talk about the use of slavery in some industries that feed America. Coffee's another one. Starbucks, I'll give them a yay because they were the first company to have a fair trade kosher for Passover coffee. It was the Italian roast. I was looking desperately for a coffee because I'm a coffee addict. And I was just not going to have a not fair trade, but I also needed to have it kosher for Pesach, for Passover. Why? Because wheat is often used in coffee. It's not one of the things that people are terribly aware of, but it's often used to help process the coffee. And so you need to not do that for Passover, for Pesach. And I was standing in a supermarket that was in Tucson, and they had the little Starbucks kiosk, and there on a bag, not even prominently, but just, so that I could see it, it said fair trade up on the top, and then underneath it had kosher for Passover. And I was like, yes, yeah! And went and bought. And so we'll have a couple of those coffee beans on the Seder plate to talk about that too. I've known a couple of people who own coffee plantations in South America, and the reason why slaves are used is usually children too. It's child slavery. It's not even just, not that any slavery is okay, but child slavery is like the real extreme to me. And the reason they do that is because the coffee trees are not tall. And so you need short people to get in and harvest the coffee beans. And it's still a very labor intensive, right? The old Juan Valdez commercials that were so popular so many years ago. And it's still hand-picked. There's not machinery that does a good job of doing it and leaving the tree standing. So it's a labor-intensive product, and Americans are fairly well addicted to it. Not only Americans, but the whole world, right? And it's an Arab gift to the world is coffee, Arabica coffee. So helps us stay up at night and do slichot services and tikkun leil shavuot and all those midnight services. Those all started after coffee became popular.
Chocolate,
yeah, chocolate. Chocolate and coffee, they go together well.
Oh, they do. Mm-hmm.
You know, I'll tell you a little trick that we do in my house. You might like this one. Instead of using white milk, we use chocolate milk in our coffee to sweeten, to lighten it and sweeten it a little bit. And it looks the same, but boy, that little extra flavor of the chocolate is just so wonderful in the coffee in the morning. So, or late at night when I'm teaching at night, I'll have some of that coffee as well. So that's a little bit about Passover, Pesach, and yes, it is time to, you can go up on our website, www.eitzchayim, and on the front page it says either Passover or Seder, it might say Passover Seder reservations. Click here. Click on that. You can do it online. You can print off a form and mail it in if you'd rather. Check, credit card, however you'd like to make your reservation. They all work. And we're having chicken, brisket, and fish. You do not have to pick. The way we do it, you can have some of each. So it's a wonderfully great meal. Here we go. So we have actually, everybody, here's the Eitz Chayim website. Thank you. And it says Passover Seder, April 1920, 6 p.m. Reservations, click here. So I remembered fairly well how to do it. And so that's right on the front page of the click to it is on the front page of our web page. We'll have to put a click through too. We'll get a Facebook event up. That was one of the things we talked about at our board meeting that it needs to happen. So we'll have that on Facebook as well. So ways that you can make a reservation and join us for our Passover Seder. And if you like Ask a Rabbi, if you're listening here, then you might just enjoy. Although I don't do as much talking at the Seder because other people are talking as well. So it's not just me. And if somebody would call in at 772-340-1590, then you could talk for a little bit and we'll listen to your question. Please call and ask me a question. And it can be Purim, it can be Passover, it can be anything else that might cross a rabbi's eyes.
I don't know.
We went and saw Fiddler as a congregation, so we've the puns and lines out of Fiddler have dramatically increased in the last few weeks. Yes, wonder of wonders.
I was just about to say that.
Fiddler on the Roof. Thank you.
And what is the Seder all about? Tradition!
Yes,
Tradition!
it is about traditions. And so that's another interesting part, right? Different families have different things that they do for the Passover Seder. So Marion is asking on Facebook here, what are we going to do for Purim tonight? She wants to make sure we do a great plug. It's Dress Up Shabbat. It's Lucie Purim for St. Lucie County. Lucie Purim. And you're welcome to come in costume. You're welcome to come with a funky hat or a crazy mask. Yes, there's going to be an orange on the Seder plate, Sharon. Of course, an orange or a tangerine. We'll talk more about that as we get closer to Passover as well. So dress up tonight. Can be a full costume, can be a partial costume, a mask, a crazy hat, or just come as you are. Hey, man.
It could be hey.
You could be hey, man. Yes, you could.
I have the trademark on that.
Yep, that's already taken.
Yep. And
I
will tell you that I'm not coming as a Hamantash this year. I've got to figure out.
Yeah, especially now that we know what it means.
Oh, people knew what it meant when I did it.
I didn't.
Yeah. Even my teenager I get a couple of teenagers at the service, which is not uncommon. We have teenagers at our services all the time. But yeah, they knew it. The one whose father picked her up at the end of the service ran out and said, "Oh, you should have seen what the rabbi was dressed as." The kind of cookie she was. It's like, that's not the good way to talk about the rabbi. But of course, it is Purim. And
are we going to get the adult story?
Not tonight.
When?
But you'll understand it. That was Wednesday night, sir.
But we didn't do it.
Yes, we did.
We did?
Yes, you just weren't there. Oh, well. Anyway. So, yeah, we had talked about doing an adult one Saturday night, and we just never, that didn't happen this year. Maybe next year. Something to look forward for next year. Lots of good things coming up. I think it's going to be a fun year at Congregation Eitz Chayim. We've got lots of great things planned lots of new things that we haven't done before, and really starting to spread our wings and start to feel a little bit more secure in our skin, if you will. So Marion says, what am I going to go as tonight? You have to come tonight and find out. I never tell. The only person who knows is my sister-in-law, and she promised not to tell. So,
not even Bill?
Not, I don't think Bill knows yet. He often doesn't, because he doesn't see me put the pieces together until he usually says to me, "You're not going to drive to services in that, are you? You'll get arrested." And Sharon is saying, no, she doesn't tell. And she's exactly right. People sometimes do a little bit. So if you come tonight, you'll find out what the rabbi's coming as. I promise you it should be great fun. I'm having fun putting the costume together. So hopefully you'll enjoy seeing it. I've been many different things, and I wear something different to each. Even in the same year, I don't wear the same costume to any of the different events. So that's what I do. I love Purim. I think it's a fun time. And in fact, one of the requirements for Purim, is to be joyous, to have fun. That's actually an instruction, a commandment, a mitzvah. It's the time of rejoicing, a time of happiness, in the month of being happy. So spring is a time for being happy. And of course it is, right? Flowers are budding, trees are pollinating. All those other joyful things.
Relationships are blooming.
There you go. For some of us, our long blooming relationships continue. And it's lots of fun. Purim is a fun holiday. I think, with a few exceptions, Jewish holidays are fun. They just are. It's fun to be Jewish. It's fun to celebrate. And even Yom Kippur, it's not a sad holiday. It's a somber holiday because you're asking for forgiveness and you're doing soul searching. But there is even there rejoicing at the end, because hopefully you did some soul searching and some repenting and some making amends with people. But Pesach, definitely a time of happiness, a time of freedom, a time of great celebration. And that's not to be minimized at all. It's worth noting that even in the ghetto, even in Auschwitz, they celebrated Pesach as best they could. I mean, obviously, if your food is a crust of bread and some soup, which is what most of them had, most meals, then it's going to be a little meager. But people found ways to celebrate, to remember the holiday, and to look forward for a time when it was going to be better. And that, I think, is just one of the strong parts of Judaism, is that remembrance that we've been here for thousands of years. We're not going anywhere. And, there have always been people who have risen up against us and tried to challenge that. And the message is simply that there is hope for the future. There is something better to be made, and we've got to do that by partnering with God and working toward that future. So it's that kind of a holiday. So there's that deep level of joy that comes out of that. And the sages said something kind of interesting to me. In Talmud, which I sometimes quote here, it says that even if a Messiah should come, if there would be this joyous day and everything else falls away, there will still be Purim So, why? Because Purim reminds us not to take ourselves too seriously. And how upside down things can get if you allow craziness to rule your life. What kind of craziness? Old hatreds, old animosities, not getting along. It's really the story of two people who couldn't get along, Haman and Mordecai. The story paints Mordecai as this angel, but you can tell from the text that he's clearly not an angel. He's far from it. And Haman, who's the really bad guy who wants to destroy all Jews because he gets angry at Mordecai. I mean, the credit that I'll give Mordecai is that he didn't try to do any harm to Haman, but he also doesn't treat Haman with respect. He has forgotten that little thing that I talked about earlier, which is that even your enemies are children of God, and that's part of what leads to the animosity in the beginning. So there's all kinds of lessons in there. There's many. Esther means I will hide many of my lessons in the book, and it's in the funky story. Nobody is an angel in that story. Nobody is an angel. Esther's not an angel. Mordecai's not an angel. Haman's not all bad. Ahasuerus, yeah, he's kind of stupid. He just is. Most of the time he's drunk, so that's his issue. And there's a couple of really funky. There's a couple of themes that you'll see carrying through if you come tonight, like a law is a law in Persia, which apparently at one time for one of the rulers was the case. He wouldn't undo one of his laws because he never made a mistake. Right, so you could write a new law, but you can't change a law because once it's a law, it's a law. Right, so and that shows you where you get with that kind of arrogance and egotist. You can't make a mistake. Even God says, I'll change my mind. I'll do something differently. Times change, different answers for different times, and there's a lot of value in that. So I think that's one of the lessons of Purim. How do we look at ourselves? Be able to laugh, and I'm reminded of my time in the military where somebody said to me, the things that we're doing, they are so important. They are so critical, but they're not that important. Don't ever take yourself too seriously, because life is for living, and it's for making the world a better place. And we can do that. We absolutely can do that if we pay attention to the lessons inside. These two holidays, they're paired. They're exactly 1 month apart. They always are every year. 1 month after Purim, it's Pesach. And ironically, one last quick little sidebar, the calendar sometimes is so out of sync with the Gregorian calendar that Easter actually occurs over Purim. And I wonder if some of the earlier anti-Semitism is not connected to that. Because if you have a bunch of Jews running around drunk, cavorting and having a great time, and it's Holy Week, I could see where there could be some misunderstandings. And if people don't understand the different sacred stories and the different calendars, then you might really misunderstand what's going on. Can you imagine having a Mardi Gras kind of a thing on Easter, right? It just, the two energies don't blend well. And, one is intended to be way earlier than the other. And every once in a while, because calendars are human-made.
Unlike days, which are God-made.
No. The definition of a day as 24 hours is very late and very human. It was not 24 hours in scriptures. It changed.
Bah, humbug. Days
were longer or shorter and had different, the watches within them were different lengths. But, we forget that, right? A lot of people will talk right now, for example, about the melody that's used for the Shema, one of the main prayers in a Jewish service. Any Jew today will recognize ta-da, na-na-na, na-na. It's just got a beautiful melody to it. Well, that's out of an opera from the 18th century. People brought it into the temple out of the public venue. It's not the melody that's in Torah. That's different. And so melodies change, but once you learn something, boy, I'll tell you, it becomes traditional. I had that brought home to me really well in Tucson. We were preparing for Shavuot, a summer festival, and we had just started using a new melody for the Shema, actually. There's an English song that we sing, Teach Your Children, with it. And we do that. We sing that here in Port St. Lucie as well. But when we started singing it in Tucson, it was new and people resisted it initially, but then people really got to like it because it's a really nice melody. It's a fun melody. And so we were getting ready for Shavuot, and I was sitting and talking with the choir, and I had said, well, since it's a festival, let's go ahead and use the traditional melody, meaning the old melody for it. And two of the choir members turned to me and said, oh, you mean, and they hummed a few bars of the new one. So, so traditions change. They do change. They just change differently for different people. You can
only bend so much.
You can only bend so.
Before I will break.
Yeah, that's an individual thing. One can bend this much and one can bend that much. Excuse me. How much any one person can bend is a function of that person. But that is a serious question, right? How much can you change and still be Jewish? Right? When do you cross the line and it's no longer Judaism? Right? Christianity did that. It broke apart and changed. Right. So
well, even within just Christianity, it changes because you can only do so much. And then, well, why don't we do it this way? Well, thus there's a new religion.
Well,
so
it's a new, but it's still.
I mean, I call Lutheran Catholic light.
I understand. There are many Christianities, and there are many Judaisms. Right? Judaism is not a monolithic one thing. Yes, we're all Jews, but we do our Jewishness differently. And there's lots of different ways to practice it and lots of different parts of it. In my lectures at IRSC, I have a line in it that says, some do, some don't. And that's very true. It's so varied, and it always has been. There has never been one way to be Jewish. Just as, once you got out of Constantine, there was more than one way to be Christian. And that's true with Hindus, and it's true with Buddhists, many different ways to be all of these things. And that is part of the beauty of being one of God's children. There are many children, many palm trees. We're all different, and we're all part of the great big planet. This is Rabbi Shafir Lobb for Ask a Rabbi.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.